Good evening, everybody. It is Straight Talk for another few weeks before we become Awakening World, the Awakening World. Um, and boy, talk about the Awakening World. We have a great guest and a really important topic. The topic is a practical and inspirational vision for our future where pragmatism meets audacity. And we're about to meet a very audacious young man, but who's also pragmatic. And that's Lucien Tarnowski. He is a community creator and designer and the founding curator of United Planet and the Up Game. And we're going to learn all about that. I met Lucien through Saturday Night Live a few weeks ago, and immediately was like, oh, I want to go deep with this guy. And he's going to love Trish, and Trish is going to love him. So,
Mm.
Trish, what is it about Lucien that we have discovered so far that's got you excited?
Other than just wanting to like hang out and have tea and like talk about
Totally.
and all the things. Um, and we've learned a good bit. We've had multiple conversations just of sweetness. And what I love is what I love about you is something that I also love about me is this want to create a world where we all thrive and
Mm, mm.
talk about practicality, pragmatism, and you know, being lovingly audacious. And I love this topic because I'm also seeing things on this as well.
So,
I can't wait to jam together.
well, let's
We
get
call,
started. Let's get
yeah, we call it kronioki.
So tell us, what has been your significant influence in your life to want to change the world at such a big level?
Good starting question, Scott. So, well, I feel there's like different levels I could answer that. One is like at a soul level, I believe that we truly are like we are them then now, and we have phenomenal power of creation, far more than our imagination, far more than the story we've been conquered by in mainstream society. You know, we've been conquered by a story that just isn't true. It's like we're a fraction of ourselves in terms of what society reflects back about ourselves in the mirror. And so, you know, from the biggest perspective, I feel that if one can create stories and narratives in one's own life that can be like be like a fractal into what one can see about reality itself, like a kind of fractal structure. If we can design experiments in communities at that level, perhaps we can build the foundational structures of a planetary civilization, because it's based on fractal truths. And the game ultimately is about seeding fractal truths. We call them dragon eggs. They're like Easter eggs. But you know, dragon eggs are like fractal truths that are true now, you know, for all time in the future and all time past. Something that's true today, you know, tomorrow and yesterday. And so from that perspective, I was inspired in my journey towards like being a kind of planetary ambassador, because I believed it to be the like most compelling story that the planet needs right now to have any shot of getting below 2 degrees, you know, temperature increases, to have any shot of actually not falling into this like god awful like narrative war that we're seeing play out in front of our eyes, that we need a like rapture ideology for the 100%, something that's like completely re-enchanting with what it means to be a Gaian right now in these bodies in this moment in time, when the stakes are so high. They've been the highest they've ever been. And so I felt that that story was like hitting the narrative to the sidelines. You know, it's like hitting the ball for the park, outside the park. And I feel that's the front line right now. Is like we need stories that seed like planetary scale hope, that are like about telling a story of just how good we can be if we like unleash our collective potential and unleash like more capital than is, you know, we cut a hole in the extractive system's pockets, you know. So on that level, I would say that's the metaphysical. And then on the personal level, my parents were just remarkable, and I can share more with you, but I think that will be, you know, I've started with that introduction. I hope it kind of resonates, but I was very fortunate with who I grew up with. My mother was always believed that, you know, everything can be changed and made better. And my father basically kind of, one could even say, like, groomed me from a very early age to know that the entire system around us is going to collapse in my lifetime, and that there's things that I could do about it. And there's things that can be like, you know, like when things start getting chaotic, like that's where we need these structures that are regenerative. And so Dad really was a kind of amazing visionary and way ahead of his time on this. And so, you know, I grew up like traveling to 70 countries, looking at community transformation, looking at like having the most amazing like mentors and guides. So my father's adopted father was the protege of Gandhi in India, this amazing saint of a man called Baba Amte. And so he was like a huge influence on my life, and like always showed me that like the power is in the youth, and that, you know, 1 billion people that loved him in India. So I was like, somehow I had that, you know, experience that's very unique in life, where my adopted grandfather was the most loved social worker in India. And like, you know, many say, you know, he was the recipient of the what's called the Nobel Prize for Religion, the Templeton Prize, and the Gandhi Peace Prize and US Peace Prize. So I was so abundant with inspiration that it was kind of the opposite was true. Like I would have to be uninspired to do anything other because it was like, it was always there, you know. It was, I've never not done this, you know, I've never not been recognizing that we're at a crescendo point in history, and it's time for you know, it's time for us to rise to our finest hour. You know, it's kind of obvious to say, but I don't think it's fully unleashed yet. So that's a long intro, but I hope it sets the kind of, it's a good question, Scott. So I'm not going to answer shorter. I'm going to answer shorter next time.
We'll see what Trish has in store.
Yeah, thank you.
You know, I just want to say exactly what age you are, but us millennials, I don't know what it is about us. We all, I don't, you know, there was a conversation or some sort of energy that we were steeping in as we were growing up, that like even some of the cartoons were, Captain Planet really impacted me, like a lot. Captain Planet impacted me.
Me too. Wait till you hear about the elemental teams.
Ferngully? Whoa. I thought about the rainforest. I'd never even seen the rainforest. I grew up in a town of 600 people in Montana. Like this. Like, I didn't even think that I would move out of Montana or even visit another place when I was young. And when I was young, I'm actually, this inspired this memory in, I don't even know where I must have saw it on the news, like about homeless people. And I ended up drawing and painting this like piece of like, how do I help these people find homes? Like, I live in Montana. I've never even seen a homeless person in my life. So there was a conversation in the mid 80s to 90s where we were formative, like our brains were forming into a conversation around collective action and how we can develop better systems. I mean, I think that this is also one of the reasons why polyamory or open relationships are exploding right now, because we saw the toxicity of our parents. We saw the systems of even just relating to anything that we're shifting and unloving, like just unloving. So I think that as we look at ways to sustainably love in the world, like how do we sustainably love the earth and what we do,
or even regeneratively love, right?
Exactly, regeneratively love ourselves and each other, and like how does it can be that way? Like it can't. We're just fighting against a indoctrinated system, a social program that we're like, some of us don't even know that we're moving away from that to a more loving system. But we've got to create it.
And exactly, and that's the great shame in this, is that the Edelman Trust Barometer really nails it with this. It's this survey that comes out every year in Davos, and they look at state of trust in the world, and at corporate level, at nation level, etc., civil society. And it's super interesting I think it was the last one that was there, I think it was 2020. It was said that 4 out of 5 people in the world, 79%, believe that the current system is broken, that it's failing, that it's unjust, that they don't, that it's clearly not a functioning system. But that's kind of surprise. It's like obvious, when, what is it, the 0.01% own more than, the numbers are ludicrous, right? 2 out of 3 people in the world believe the future is going to be even worse than the present. Right? Let those numbers sink in, right? 2 out of 3 people in the world believe the future is going to be even worse than the present. Like that. Thank you, Black Mirror. Thank you, Netflix. Thank you, Squid Game. Thank you. Like we are intoxicated in dark visions of the future. It is the number one shows that we feed ourselves with as a collective. It's like feeding this underbelly, this trauma that needs to come through. So I think we're talking about crafting a story at the level of Star Wars, at the level of Avatar, but one that everybody can see themselves in it, and come and meet their future self, come and join the party of we created a new planetary civilization. We live in a just society. We live in one in balance with our environment, and with gender harmony and free open education and complete free access to healthcare, and we live and come and look at this world and then come help us build it, because we're building it together, And what if the biggest asset class no one's heard of is futures, where we quite literally flip the funding model, and instead of funding startups, we fund upstarts. And these are stories that come from the future, that get funded from the future based on outcome-based milestones, funding particular goals that are seen as good for the planetary commons. So there's new ways that we can completely just transform that narrative that you spoke of, that people are not so aware even that that this has become a worldview in some sense, and I studied comparative religion for 4 years, and I wrote my dissertation on capitalism as a religion, and it was called Selling Religion: Analysis of Capitalism as a Religion. And I basically argued that it's super interesting, right? It's that I argued that because capitalism was given birth to by Protestant Christianity, it has the ghost of Protestant Christianity in it, but it's had its umbilical cord cut, and it's had its connection to the sacred cut, but it's still there because it's a child of it. And so it's a super interesting concept here, because it's I wrote back 12 years ago that maybe the most saving grace aspect of capitalism is the fact that it can be defined as a religion. Because when that, its origin story, you can do basically ninja Aikido moves to go back to the origin story from which to channel its energy, do an Aikido move on capitalism itself. And I think that's the level of story and anthropology and history and future time travel and collective wisdom. That's the game that we, are able to play this decade. It's going to be amazing. So
I've taken about 17 notes already of things. So I want to just riff on a couple of things you said and then I have a question. I love that idea from startups to upstarts, and really almost every great movement forward is channeled, comes in. Bob Dylan had a great line. Somebody said, "How do you write so many songs?" He said, "I don't write them. I just write them down."
yeah, nailed it. Yeah.
Isn't that the way of putting it? And of course, Einstein, But you said something just now about the Aikido move on capitalism, and I just want people to know what's beautiful about Aikido as a martial art form is that it is not based on attack and defeat. It is based on an entirely different premise, which is that when you are being attacked, you have the advantage because anyone attacking you is off center. And so if you're centered, the way you work is you redirect the energy of your attacker. So the basic move is as the attacker comes towards you, you step to the side and you redirect their energy. And you're actually interested in protecting your attacker. Now, not at your own harm, but you're actually part of the game of Aikido is how can I protect myself? How can I protect the attacker and redirect the energy? But I've never heard what he said, which is beautiful, making an Aikido move on capitalism. Because most of us do know that capitalism is run amok and is, created a lot of the problems that we face. So I love that move. That is freaking awesome.
Well, I can give you, Scott, a cool example.
Yes, please do.
Because it's a kind of a big statement. And I think there's specific examples of Aikido moves on capitalism that I think I can share that I think are interesting and very pragmatic, but they're not yet scaled. These are cooking up in the kind of alchemist kitchen of experimenting with concepts right now. But one example is this concept called stars. It's the idea was how do we tell a new story about money? Because ultimately money is energy, and that's going to be one of the big kind of schmutz areas that people carry so much trauma around. So what is the new story of money, and how do we tell a story that's abundant and universal and got justice built in and equity, and it's a abundant like the stars, how do we design that story from the future so as its own success as a story takes the extractive financial system and creates an economic vacuum that as more and more belief, more and more energy, more and more currency comes from the existing system into the next system, it creates a self-fulfilling prophecy, like a kind of economic toroidal field, if you can kind of imagine that, sucking the energy up. And how it works is, at least in terms of the experiment that we're running, is we just simply launch stars from the future as the planetary currency in 2030. And back on the beginning, January 1st, 2020, we pegged one star to $1 on that day. And so after the first day of COVID, after that first day, obviously the American government have been printing a lot of dollars. Back when we announced this peg, it was Earth Day, 50 years of Earth Day on April 22nd. And we said, okay, from this day on, $1 dollar equals 1 star, but at the exchange rate of today. And so this fascinating thing happened that as the US government prints more money, the exchange rate to stars goes up. And so at the time in April, the total supply of US dollars was 4.85 trillion. But Uncle Sam has been printing lots of dollars. You know, you can think of quantitative easing, it's called, right? You can think of that as like the national equivalent of like economic crack addiction or like an opioid crisis. You know, it's like literally a tax on future generations and the environment, and it's got like really a lot of bad things in it. It's like not dealing with the symptoms, it's just like numbing the true issue. And so as more money is printed, the idea is that that exchange rate goes up, which creates more and more incentives for more and more people to bring their capital into the next system, into the decentralized planetary bank called the Star Bank. And as more and more people and organizations and cities start to say, actually, we would like to move to a planetary currency where the minimum and maximum you can get paid in a day is 100x through the game. And so that's how we're prototyping it. So there's designs built into it, and like outcome-based financing where you can do like smart contracts tying to a particular goal that comes through the game. So currency is, you know, it's one of those really pragmatic, very, you know, it's one of those stories that is so ready for a completely new story. You know, it's like the story of money, the story of the transformation of society, the story of the transformation of the metaverse not being some like dark place where people go to like avoid being in real life, but actually it's a place where we go and meet a digital twin of the present planet. And we find in our local communities everywhere around the world transformation projects that I can get paid to contribute my time to. You know, I can like find communities that are working on transforming my community. I can find like city mayors could partner with us and go and say, okay, our citizen democracy, our like public voting of like where money gets spent could go through the game and through stars. And we could actually enable the city to contribute themselves financially, and any resident of the city to join teams to go and deliver on the mission, you know, and get paid for it. And so we can have like, the money can transform every different space, but it's like one layer of it, you know. First comes the story. And that's the key point, I think, here is like, what is the story of this like planetary age, you know, of this new world collective? And I think that's the key point right now, is how do we all come together to all start sharing the same story of the future, where we did it, where we got the job done, where we can feed ourselves all the radical hope we need in order to get back up and do it, you know, and like get it done. But first we need to agree, like, what are we getting done here? You know, what is this story? It's like, it doesn't need to be more, it doesn't need to be like what we have less bad, you know. It's like, why stop there? Like, why not reimagine the entire healthcare system and the education system? And that's the beauty of 2030, is being able to do it from the future.
Mm-hmm.
So, sorry, I'm on a bit of a like long answer.
I'm freaking loving it. I'm gonna let I've got so many things I want to ask you about, but I don't want to dominate here. I'm loving what you're sharing. Trish, where do you want to go next, or where do you want to riff on what he has said?
Again, this show is built around pragmatism meeting audacity and actual practical ideas of how to move forward. And that's where I want to go, is I think that we can get into the concept of all of these things, but I'm a very action meets the ground sort of love action is love in part. It is my aspect of love. And one of the things is, yes, our children are our future. I don't know exactly what you said. You said something like that, but I was like, yes, children.
Yes, our children first world. And not only just our future, we are, like, the thing I realized with the up game is the way we can create the next system is from the state of being like children.
Yes.
It's so beautifully obvious when you see that, and it's like, oh, that Christ narrative, the Christos narrative of like, be like that of a child to enter the kingdom, but you need to be like that of a child to enter the kingdom of heaven. I was like, wow, this is a concept here, which is like, to create heaven on earth, literally, is to enter the belief, to have childlike faith that not only is it possible, but we've done it, and I've seen it, and I felt it, and I can tell the stories. And that's, to me, that's the transition of the second coming of Christ being this concept of an individuated world, the kind of age of the lone wolf in some sense, to this Sangha, to this, the umpteenth coming, like all of our becoming. And I think that's the like most exciting thing right now, is that it's like this transition from the Old Testament to the New Testament to the Now Testament. And it's like, it's happening now, and like, we're the ones to do it. And it's beyond anything. Like, it's like, I get the privilege to literally do this every day, of like speaking to kind of epic humans building the future. And it's like, we are so capable, so much more capable than it's like let on. And, and that's because the existing system is failing and wanting to hold on to itself, rather than us actually wake up and smell the coffee and be like, we need a planetary team to gather together to do whatever there was the moonshot. We've got the earth shot here, and we need to gather together and like bring humanity's best to completely reimagine every aspect of our society, including asking questions like, what is the role of nations in the future? Because nations have had their time. They have failed to deliver in a sense, in that they have failed to deliver on the mandate of planetary boundaries. And I don't believe they've got the capacity to deliver this decade, which means we do need new decentralized, like, organizations that are highly capable of like making sure that we transform ourselves into a world that serves us all, and like thriving life and all species and the planet, and get the basics right, really. So I think that's the key point I wanted to share there. I've just got off a flight, and I'm on a bit of I've just been in silence for a while, and I'm like on a bit of a roll of reflections, excuse me.
You are on a beautiful roll. I want to go back to something I wrote down in your opening salvo of wisdom or possibility. A rapture ideology for Gaians. And just for
Gaians, and this actually came from Jamie Wheel. It's a rapture ideology for the 100%, which means and then I said for all Gaians. So to me, Gaians, we developed a United Planet. We developed the Gaian Oath, which goes like this. And, I shared it on the show. We are a united planet. I am Gaian. On my honor, I commit to a thriving civilization in harmony with all life. And we say that before every game. And the notion here is, how do we expand our perception of inclusion and our experience of inclusion to include all of us or none of us? Like, it is, I am them, then now. Like, I am fully, like, there is no othering in the Gaian identity. And part of the narrative is, how do we develop a new planetary language called Gaian that is a quantum leap in language? Because right now the spoken word is very limited You know, we need to wait in turns. Like I'm speaking way too much. But like, wouldn't it be great if the three of us were wearing Amore skins and we could completely feel in a synchronized triad what each other is feeling right now? We could be telepathically connected, and we could be polychronic in that all times we can access our collective ancestry, our individual ancestry, and use that as stability to navigate into our future selves. And that like, if we can be in those type of language triads of communication that like massively levels up our connection to each other, our empathy, our like seeing each other in the world as one, you know, that can be the quantum leap in terms of like how we see ourselves, and like really truly enabling like billions of people to become their best self, you know, to travel through this new transition. And maybe that is what the myth of the Tower of Babel was getting at, you know, maybe, right? We came from a universal language that maybe we can communicate with plants and animals as well. You know, like there's a lot of stacks to the language stack, and no one's really attempted this. Like English, you know, like Esperanto was an attempt, but that was based on linguistics and like spoken word. But like we can use gestures, and this is where we did the game in Damanhur called Time Ritual, and that's where, you know, Falco has all this like sacred language and gestures and sounds that go with, you know, with their language. And I think this is like a perfect example of pragmatism. Like we're thinking something so everyday, something so colloquial, that we're talking about like a new planetary language, like a completely new way of communicating with each other. And that is like pragmatic audacity right there, like a new planetary language. It's like it try and knock some holes in that strategy. It's like one of those ideas that like should happen, you know. And I'd love to pin planetary embassies as well to talk about something, but that's yeah.
Well, I want you to put on your Mr. Rogers hat, because we're going to have a word of the day, because you actually used a word that I've never heard before. So you get to educate us. What is polychronic?
Polychronic. Yeah, thank you for this. So that was Scott. You just picked up a dragon egg. So I do this thing called time farming, where in different interviews I'll like lay certain words and just use them in the future. Polychronic means beyond a single moment in time. So what if we can actually communicate? What if our life experience, that we're in a particular prison box, if you like, we're in a particular like perception box, you could call it, where our experience of time is linear and we're experiencing the now, but there's actually more than the now going on. You know, we're just like limited in our perception of it right now. But if we can do what the Greeks described as going from like chronos to actually getting to that intersection of kairos, which was like, chronos is clock time and kairos is like all time, like everything that ever has and ever will exist. And I think this is like the really interesting thing, is if we can go to a space richly at the intersection between chronos and kairos, I think like that's like the equivalent of gold at the end of the rainbow. You know, it's like there's magic there. And that magic, I think, is potent enough to give us the rocket fuel to birth what's already being birthed all around us. You know, this is already happening. It's not about my idea. I'm one of thousands, you're both self included, that are speakers. We're like adding texture and tapestry to this beautiful narrative, you know. And it's like it's I think it's so beautiful that it's inevitable.
I'm going to come back into just a bit of the conversation that we were in before. And so it's taking all of us to restructure, right? You're at a very planetary level. You're looking at from like 10,000 to 100,000 foot view. And then there's people like maybe Scott and I that are on the front lines on the ground, teaching people even just the things like what you said. I don't exactly remember. I don't have that kind of brain to remember verbatim. But you were talking about what I heard was calibration and to each other, to the planet, to listening. And that's one of the things that the gift of trauma, I'm gonna say something bold, that there's a gift of people who have been traumatized, especially in previous generations, including self, is that I have a gift to calibrate and listen, and I can feel energies in the space. Some might call it empathy. I don't like to use that word because it's particularly attached to victimization and narcissism. But if you can use your gifts of learning to have calibrated to another person's emotions, to watch their body language, to listen to their tone of their voice, to listen to even just the earth that you're walking on, to hear your cat. If you have a pet, this is a great way to learn how to calibrate. Because if you follow your pet around, it'll talk to you, and it'll bring you places. It'll tell you what it needs without actually using English language or whatever you're using, because language has been used to create a consensus reality. Now we get to choose different language and different words like polychronic. So we have the opportunity to sit and choose. And I think that's why people are getting quiet. When we listen, when we start to feel into our bodies, when we start to actually humanize ourselves. So we had a conversation, maybe it was last week, and we had a guy named Bruce Lyon on, who I totally adore. And he was sharing about just being really human instead of, I think sometimes we have this tendency to shame or push away our humanness, which might be sadness or anger or whatever it is. This human body does the thing. Instead of just being able to be honest and accepting of it, we have this tendency to push it away, which I don't know if you know what happens, but it creates that prohibition sense, and then binging.
Totally.
Went crazy after pandemic. Now, I had some ideas of how just the people on the front lines, if you want to make practical steps, if you want to be bold and really choose to do something different, and these are literally some of the most home steps that you could do. You don't have to be an intellectual. You don't have to be on the front lines of having any education, but it's like humanizing other humans, empathy, meeting the human experience. Like, people are going to be human. They're going to have sadness. They're going to have frustration. Can you just meet them there and accept and love them in that? That's how we move through it faster. Another thing was to acknowledge our impact. Like, whatever we're impacting, I impact you now, and this conversation is going to impact the people that you are relating to. I'm impacting the world that I'm walking on, every breath that I take right now, how I interact with each person, where I go to the grocery store, like knowing what you're investing your time, energy, and money into. And then restoring impact where, regardless of whether you intended to do harm, it doesn't really matter. Intention doesn't necessarily mean anything. Sorry, I don't know if this is sorry for everyone who believes that. But impact is really powerful. I don't intend to harm the earth, but I do. And so I need to restore my integrity and move into attuning with the whole, with the everything, with harmonizing with nature, with harmonizing
exactly.
And Lucien and my cat and my stepmom and, the people around me and the things around me, the actual living, the squirrels, like, I'm calibrating to every moment. And that means that we have to listen. We have to slow down and just be with another person. And then the last part of restoring integrity is living in your integrity. So I can say, oh my gosh, I am this eco-friendly whatever, or I'm an ally to LGBTQIA plus folks. But if I'm not actively and actionably taking that audacious step to move towards loving action, then I'm just talking. So we have to be actionable. We have to like step into that loving container. And I'd love to hear what Lucien has to say about those pieces there. I don't know where he went. But that's what I've been thinking about. And I'm also, just to say, I'm teaching a class at the Evolve Festival coming up soon. And it is on this exact topic, cultivating the new world and loving beyond the self.
And what day and time so our people can tune in?
Monday, this coming Monday, the 6th. I think it's Monday the 6th at, I have no idea. It's in the evening, I know that though.
I remember, no, I wrote it down. It's at 6 p.m.
6
So
p.m.
it's Monday, December 6th at 6 p.m. I originally thought I was going to be on a plane flight, but I'm not. So I will be there if they allow me in.
And I have some opportunity to help the festival if that's what you would like. For a lot of really amazing conversations. Actually, there is one, Lucien, you might like this one, called Soul Relating. I don't know, but I don't know what it's about exactly, but I'm really curious. It's with the Trans-Himalayan teachings. I don't know. I'm very curious about it.
So yes.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. Lucien, are you back with us?
I am. Yeah. Sorry, I needed to run to the restaurant. So apologies.
Next time you can just tell me to pause recording. You know, we are recording, so you can just say, "Hey, Scott, I got to pee. Can we pause?" But you know,
I just figured you can do one shot because I could hear you. I just put myself on mute, so I was with you for all the conversation.
Trish waxed poetic for a while.
I heard it all.
Any thoughts on that you'd like to riff on of what Trish had to say?
Yeah, I mean, you know, Trish, this is the pattern interrupt. What you're describing is that world where people have permission to be their like best self and their kindest self. And you know, the self, we all want to see each other and be seen, but we're like carrying so much trauma. You know, there's this like, I call it the unwholesome threesome of the victim, hero, perpetrator cycle of trauma that you see going on in so much of life. And you know, we all have like, it's such a draw for people to go into that you know cycle, and it's what keeps us separate. You know, it's what sorry,
They benefit from that.
yeah
Needs met from doing those things. That's how we keep the cycle.
exactly. And I feel like this is like one of the culture hacking principles of the up game, is that we go into a space where you know, that doesn't exist, that we have like consciously had a collective death ceremony to our individual and collective trauma, and we enter a space which is of our finest, most noble, like childlike, wondrous self, to show up in the greatest possibility of what this moment could bring out in us. And it's like, can we create batch healing, as Jamie Wheels calls it, like batch forgiveness, for people to do collective trauma work at scale? Because that's really like, that's the front line. Like, this is work that you do. And I see you and Scott are just such like freaking, you know, I said it on the last call, like, you inspire me so much, because it is the front line of where these transformations are taking place. But you know, I just feel that sometimes it's really helpful to hear that, like, hey, you know, I've been running the lines along a lot of these communities, and the good news is we can all have confidence that there's a collective intelligence at play that is way beyond any human, and is so freaking genius. And like, Gaia is in a metamorphosis, and we're in the chrysalis, and we're like going through it, and it is like so divine that it is just like, it makes me just, you know, it is so here in every single one of us and all of us at both at the same time, and it's like, yeah.
I was doing something maybe a few months ago. I was like, Scott, how do you do this thing that you do? How do you just, it's the thing that I love about him. And I'm totally annoyed about it because I don't have this yet, which is very human, right? I'm just being honest about it. I'm like, how do you do this thing where you're just easygoing all the time? It's terribly obnoxious. Oh, you just, I'm going to butcher it, but you could probably riff on this, but it was, you just know that it's all going to be okay. And I've been saying with that for the last, I've been saying that, what does it just mean to know that regardless, I was out on my own at 17 doing I've been in some crazy situations and just, I've made it through. I'm now 35. Whoa, I know. Just kidding. And now knowing that I made it thus far and I still haven't figured out, I haven't taken the door out, the exit yet. So it's going to be okay. If I can figure it out, it's going to be okay. And just sitting with Scott's beautiful voice in my ear sometimes. Sometimes you just need a little muse or a little, an Elvin Scott just sitting on one of your little folds of your ear saying, hey. And to actually embody that is a really powerful place. So knowing that, that collective conscious place, there's something at work that we all can't quite see. We have inklings, we have feelings about it. And that's part of it, is knowing that it is okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you for the lovely compliment. And that actually leads to a question I want to ask. So it is true. I absolutely.
Are an Elven.
I get on my magic wand and do my Gandalf.
Yeah, there you go, Scott.
Put on the hat, and I've got the hat back there.
You're such a bright light of an archetype, Scott. It's it's just, it's such a joy. It's one of the things I love most is when I see people running full speed into the center of the light of the archetype that is them.
Yeah, well, and it's funny because obviously I haven't always been this age and I haven't always looked this way, but it's okay, this is the role that I'm playing now. But here's the question. So yes, I absolutely, and I use the, we are the imaginal cells finding each other in the soup of the dying caterpillar, and I believe that to be true.
T cells as well, Gaian T cells.
And I loved kind of one of the pieces you added today of, as we find each other, we're going to play this virtual game, which is taking our positive vision of the future and making it manifest now. So I love that. That's kind of my interpretation of part of what I heard you say. Now, here's an interesting question for you. Many of the truly advanced kind of psychics and metaphysical people that I've met over decades now say that we're coming to a choice point where the collective dream is going to split into multiple timelines. And it's interesting that even Marvel, the most, who reaches the most people on the planet? It's Marvel. And Marvel is introducing the multiverse. And so people are beginning to realize through quantum physics and through, Marvel movies that, okay, there's a multiverse. There's all these different alternate realities. So the metaphysical question for you, and I definitely want to hear what Trish has to say as well, to what degree are we in a time where we're actually choosing which timeline we're going to ride? Or, because there are people that, while we're playing your video game or your virtual reality game of how do we create a world of peace and fairness, there are other people that are playing a game where they are the apocalyptic survivors and they've got cockroaches the size of my dog, and I died in their game. I got blown up. I didn't make it. So, and everybody has a right to their reality. So, what are your thoughts about that? Maybe there's this division taking place of everybody's gets to choose which dream within the collective dream, which timeline they're actually choosing to experience.
Oh, Scott, such a good question. There's so much there.
There's a lot there.
Yeah, it's just so much there. Community, common unity. Do you know how I would love to answer that question? Not with my words. I have some great words. They're some of my most favorite words from a guide of mine called White Eagle. Okay. I'd love to answer that question with this passage.
Okay.
Because it's such an expression of actually like, just a moment.
I will put the spotlight on the lovely Trish while he pulls that together. Trish, what are your thoughts about that?
And that is also a very limiting and separating thought. Like if I am Lucian and Lucian is me and you are me and I am the water bottle that I drink from and the dog poop on the ground, like it's not, I just don't see it as being a separate reality. Like I feel that, and knowing you has helped me understand this, is that there's no separation between cells. Like we're sharing the same cells right here. Now I have the reality that I've been fed.
Actually, by the way, we're sharing the same molecules, not the same cells.
Okay, you're right.
Your cells are your own, but we do share the molecules.
DNA, yes, molecules. Okay, we share the same molecules, yes. And it's really in the sense for me is that just because I run a certain chemistry in my body that creates certain neural pathway linkage and ways that I think based on a lot of different things and 35 years of experience, like doesn't mean that I'm not living in the same reality or I'm going to be living in a different, like a shift of perspective in that sense. It's like I'm not going to be left behind and because I'm not blissed out. I'm in this space of just wanting to humanize people for having their own experience. Like whatever he's having in this world, like that is his. As much as I could like take a straw and go, I want what he's having, like I'm still gonna have my same chemistry. So that's where I feel about that. Loving is being with in the radical.
Totally. Trish, I love being on this call with you. It's so good. Yeah, such wisdom you're sharing. Thank you. You know, you're gonna laugh at this passage. So this was the passage, actually, Trish, speaking of what we were speaking about, opening. This was the last passage I read before my mum died. And it was the book that I discovered by my mum's bedside table 24 hours before she died. And it was that point that I picked up this passage and White Eagle came into my life with this, what I'm going to read. Man seeks individualism because he seeks self-consciousness. But later he learns that the way to God consciousness is through the group. You think of yourselves as individuals, as monads, because you are learning expression on the outer plane. But my brethren, you've yet to learn that you are part of a group. You, the individual, we liken to the proton, and around you circulates the electrons. You must open your consciousness to this divine cosmic reality. You are nothing. Of yourselves, you can do nothing.
I'll click this.
You cannot live alone. You have many selves, many personalities. You belong to your group, and your group belongs to many other groups, which form a community. And that community belongs to many other communities, which form a sphere, and so on and on. Every man or woman who thinks that he or she is separate and lives with this thought of self-life is living in darkness. Humanity is learning by the hard way this truth of group life, of brotherhood, of cooperation, and expansion of the little consciousness into the God consciousness. The only way you can realize this is through pure love. Look up into the heavens and see this truth demonstrated in the myriad stars. I am nothing, yet I am all when I recognize all.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Wow.
That's my belief, is that it's not, it's diversity as a, diversity as an advantage. It's like, it's the New World Collective, not the New World Order. And it's inclusive of the fullest potentiality of every individual being. But it's very, very clear that this is not a compromising situation. We're not in a world that it's okay for half the world to go and like fail at climate change. It's just simply not okay. Like, it's all of us or none of us. And there are very clearly needs to create planetary boundaries, of which nation states are hopelessly failing. And so that's my kind of feeling, is that we need to go hyper local and like radically self-expressed, and, you know, celebrate the full diversity of culture, whilst being unequivocal in our goals of what acceptable looks like. You know, like, this is not an acceptable world. The fact we have hunger, the fact we have poverty, the fact we have any of these things that are just simply like not acceptable. Like, the world does not need to operate like that. And so I think that's the key point in my feeling, is like, it's a layer above like left and right meta crisis of meaning, you know, where there's identity politics going on in the left and right, and people are like falling off the edges with rapture ideologies, like with kind of like new stories, mythologies that are like not true and highly divisive and like separatist. And the question I would love to invite us all is like, reflect on where is what we're being told and the stories we're telling separating us from others around the world. And that might just be our work as well. Like, where can we like take those separations away? And that, to me, is like, that's why we call the United Planet the United Planet. It's a story about the best version of ourselves, and it's a story told by hundreds and then, you know, thousands of us, to recognize the power of the story. You know, ultimately, its stories are what's always what has transformed our civilizations, and it's certainly high time for a civilization handbrake turn and a civilization upgrade, because this one sucks. You know, we've destroyed so much of our natural habitat, and it's unacceptable to continue. And so I think that's the key point. The key feeling for me right now is it really does feel like we're at a moment of perception and transformation where it really will be all of us or none of us. And it's like, I don't like telling the stories of we're going to all separate into these different factions of like radical societies, because that means we like, and what we need to go through to get to this place, that's a different question. That's where we're going to deal with, we've got some harsh realities of climate change, of social injustice, of like, you know, infrastructure needs to be built, but like, we need a North Star, like, or even North Star is not the right word. It's like a galactic star, because it's not about North and South, because that's different depending where you are. But it's like a galactic star of like, how can we each feel invited to contribute our story to the greatest story ever told? You know, that is the greatest story we can tell about ourselves. That's like, that's what I feel is like, if we all did that, and we all have permission to do that, that's got a chance, you know.
I love how loving you are. Radical loving men.
Radical loving. Yeah.
It's a radical act to be this loving, to be this considerate of others and of beyond self. Like, I mean, I don't know how to encompass the all. Like, I don't know what that, there's a word for it.
I mean, we've got so many guides. It's like returning the sacred, re-enchanting. It's been prophesied by so many times. It's like, guys, it's happening. It's like this is our becoming. This is our great becoming. You know, it's like it's so great. It's like, but you know, it's not to bypass. It's not to have a children's revolution. It's not to go and be like, climate change isn't happening. It's all like, you know, it's all jolly. Like, I grew up in a leprosarium. You know, my family members are like leprosy patients. Like, my father had me watch a man in the jungle have his leg amputated after a bear bite without anesthetic at the age of 9, because he was like, you need to see the brutality of the real world, because this is going to happen in your lifetime. And so I've like taken my, like, you know, I've kind of, part of this response in me is like, guys, this is going to get really, really bad if we don't have like a plan to rapidly dial society into a new design movement that is like transforming every aspect of our society. It could so easily get Mad Max, you know. It's like, it's right there. My father always raised me, because he was a prisoner of war in Poland, and he always raised me with society's one missed meal from anarchy. In that, if we don't know where our food's coming from, like any sense of civil society just goes out the window. And we're living in a very food insecure world, and that's got to change.
And water. The Himalayas are melting, and my understanding is 40% of the world gets its water from the Himalayas, and they're melting. And so there's going to be. I studied with Al Gore, and he said the next world war will be over water.
Mm.
Have you ever read?
Well, I hope, you know, I'll say to Al Gore, and I've met him numerous times, I would be like, stop speaking about the next world war, because we ain't gonna have one if you know, it's like what Einstein said. He said, I don't know about World War III, I know World War IV will be fought with sticks and stones. Right. It's like, we cannot afford a world war. It's like, that's game over territory. We extinguished ourselves by that time. So it's like, let's like not go there, and let's design elegant ways to experiment at a planetary level, the reimagination of like every aspect of our society, so that we can actually, like, when this system that is inevitably going to clash, there's like nothing I'm more certain of about in the kind of pragmatic 3D world than that this system is a house of cards that's coming down.
It's started. It has started.
It started, right? You know, it's like how long it will take, what will happen, how fast it will happen, you know, and our ability to respond in an appropriate, just, ethical, spirited guide, you know, way, I think is enormously influenced by the stories we tell about ourselves.
Well, that's the perfect segue, because we got to wrap up into United Planet, and you are the curator of United Planet, a game to upgrade civilization. So everybody, you can go find this. We're going to take a look at it right now, but this is online at unitedplan.et, as in extraterrestrial, or as Lucien pointed out, Ethiopia. And we'll do
where we all come from.
We'll do another show about the relationship between ET and Ethiopia, because that's a conversation. All right, so now when people come here, and that kind of describes what it is, you talked a lot about it today, you know, prototyping regenerative civilization. So once we get down to this area, what do we do? What happens?
So thank you, Scott, for taking us here. So this is the upgame. This is the planetary leagues. There's 16 of them. And what we did is, like, I went through a whole process of trying to kind of remember the future of the design of like how the game could work. And so what we did is we took the Native American medicine wheel, which has got the 4 directions and representing the 4 elements. And we said, okay, let's take the UN Sustainable Development Goals, which are global goals, and let's talk about them from the vantage point of having done them. There's 17 goals out there. We're all about goal 17. So there's 16 that we took, 16 planetary leagues. And we put them into the 4 elements. And what we've done is we created a game that is about storytelling each one of these elements. And so we start right now with, we're in land stewardship. We're on the last game of the earth element. And then we go through, we've got different dates where we bring teams together to play these games. And I'll go through the leagues in a moment. But what we're doing is we're inviting teams to come together to join one of 4 teams. There's the earth team, air team, fire team, and water team. And each one of those teams designs an immersive day-long experience of the world in 2030, where we've reached our fullest potential. It's the best story we could possibly tell. And we go through this journey of creating the stories and then reverse engineering the strategies. And our goal is to start to connect funding to these organizations that can tell their story from the future. And so we go through this journey, and we literally, our intention is to unleash these new stories of our collective best. And so we're recording films for each game of people telling these stories. And we're creating essentially a prototype of what we see as like a new world game, a game to story the future society, and for everybody everywhere in the world to start to get involved. And, you know, the Saturday Night Alive community, for example, to play the game and play the future and meet your future self and like see how would you transform every community? How would you transform the Saturday Night Alive community and others? And so what we're seeing is that it's a really powerful engine for people to be seen, meet their best self, like have a collective death experience, birth one's unlimited self, one's like twice born, where you kind of choose to birth your best self. And you spend 5 days going through this elemental journey of experiencing the world in 2030, to then conclude with a crescendo, which is the ether day. Like we were talking about Captain Planet earlier. We all come together, all 4 teams come together, and we actually birth on the 5th day. We birth a new story for the collective. So it's like a new story about land stewardship or gender harmony. And Scott, if you just pull that back up a moment, I can go through it. So that's land stewardship right now. And then the other leagues are, we go from land stewardship to health and well-being, and then health and well-being to thriving for all, and then on to planetary health, unleashing potential. So how do we all reach our fullest potential? Gender harmony. So, you know, how are we living in a world where we're balanced both internally and with everyone outside? So the, you know, sacred masculine and feminine in each one of us. Ubiquitous energy. How do we make sure that energy is not, backed by the oil dollar, but it's rather, regenerative and free and universal, because that's going to change everything. To the wealthy commons, how do we make sure that the commons is larger than the private sector, that the commons outsizes the private sector, and that we have education commons, a healthcare commons, a water commons, a food commons, all of the basic needs of society are taken care of in the planetary commons. Is the design of the design challenge. To circular economies, how do we make sure that we're integrating, that we're not putting waste into the cycle, that we're having completely circular economies, and the true cost of a product on its full life cycle is being shared with the cost models of how these go through society. To then community abundance, how do we all live thriving lives in thriving communities? Water security, how do we make sure that we secure our source of water, because it is life? Ocean stewardship, like it's terrible what we've done, and so like we need to transform that to peace and justice, where, for example, we're doing a game. It's going to be in Jerusalem, where we'll bring people from around the world and Israelis and Palestinians together to come and tell the story from the future in Jerusalem about how we created planetary peace. And then food abundance, it's all about how do we make sure that, you know, everybody is not just fed but well fed, that it's not just calories in the industrial food system, but it's actually like food is the platform, the springboard from which we birth the planetary civilization. And that, you know, that's the one thing we've been conquered by, you know, what the Romans used to call, like, how do you control a mob? You feed them bread and games. It's like bread and circuses. And it's like we've been so like numbed by a factory food system and a, you know, fast food system that's just like so bad for our potential, to then infrastructure transformation. So how do we regenerate, how do we transform, you know, our like car systems that they're sharing, our hospital systems? How do we transform like existing organizations into you know, organizations from the future into the commons? And then regenerative cities, you know, 50% of us more already live in cities, and it's growing. And so how do we live in cities that, you know, work? And so this goes through this league. Each one of these games, we bring people together to tell those stories, and that we capture those stories, and we're creating essentially a new planetary mythology. And then we've got the Mystery League, which is like where we do more of the kind of esoteric games, where it's things like time ritual and Damanhur, and we explore like what is the concept of time in stepping outside of time when designing a thriving civilization for all. And so questions like that, what it's like conscious sexuality, you'll be pleased to hear, Trish. We're doing a game on psychedelic renaissance. We're doing a game at Burning Man called Galactic Picnic. So anyone in Burning Man in 2022, you can join the Galactic Picnic. It's going to meet up at a different spot on the playa each day. And it's going to just gather everybody that wants to time travel together and live in this world in the playa and tell stories together. So we do these kind of things, but that's the notion, that's the kind of stage of the game right now, is we're in like fast prototyping stage of like, how do we remember the way that we did it? How do we remember the way that we gamified every aspect of our world to work for all? That we told a different story about ourselves. And like it's like in that early kind of beautiful cooking pot, where we can close this out, if you like, Scott and Trish, with a little like jam on land, you know, given its land stewardship, with like what we remember about land stewardship in 2030 together.
Right. I love that. I love that. Are you familiar with David Gershon, Christian Hoffman, and the Peace by 2030 program?
Yeah. I've been on
We've
some.
had him on Saturday Night Live. I've had him on the show.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, no,
No,
he's like he's such an elder in this. There's epic work, you know. I'm really like, I mean, we're all standing on each other's shoulders here, and
well,
like,
and everybody's an imaginal cell
yeah,
of a butterfly. And I am so inspired by who you are, what you're doing. We're way past our time, unfortunately.
yeah.
But it's been brilliant. And Trish, I want to give you an opportunity for any of your closing thoughts.
Um, you caught me off guard,
Oh,
Scott.
my Lucien,
Um,
you inspire
I'm
me.
not ready.
You do. You just inspire me. It's like, yes, we can do it. Like, listen, and it's not only like rah rah, but this is brilliant for us to go to the future and go back and remember how we did it, and the way you've laid out, you know, the very pragmatic things that we need to deal with. I think it's fucking brilliant, and I don't use
Oh,
that
Scott,
word
thank
very
you,
often. Trish will tell
thank you.
once
It's
every
taken
3 months.
lots of devotion, and you know, we're just at the beginning, but you know, honestly, it comes through me, not from me. And you know, it's also my witnessing. You know, I'm a noospheric pole position. I'm a sort of noospheric node of many brilliant people's like feedback, etc. So this is, you know, really as a child of the collective intelligence, and I'm just like, is the honor of my life to kind of land the lightning and like put it into a structure called the up game and like to run it. Excuse me. So, but yeah, it's Trish. I'm such a pleasure to be, you know, here with you. Excuse me, I'm gonna go blow my nose. Could you pause for a moment? Stop.
Trish, it's your turn.
Scott, did you connect Lucian and the twin rings?
Oh,
Yeah.
that would be a good connection for sure. Definitely. Definitely.
Well,
Yes.
yes, put a lot of love into Lucian's.
Oh yeah, no, what he's doing, I mean, it's like he's really got a beautiful, beautiful vision. So yes, I will turn the twin ray onto Lucian and Lucian onto twin ray. Yeah.
Summer and John Raymer as well.
I love John Raymer. He's great.
Making sure, like, let's
Yeah, I need to catch up with him actually. No, that's a good like suggestion.
Yeah.
Well,
we're way overdue.
I love I will hold this vision and this idea of this imagery in the next few days of imagining what the world in 2030 looks like and track it back. And that's what I'm going to sit in my altar and spend time while I'm traveling thinking about.
I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
Invite everyone to do that and to take this as a, you know, take this into family Christmas, have a 2030 visioning session together. You know,
That's a good
more
idea.
people spreading, you know, more people having conversations. One great thing that we started with is having parties in 2030 where you throw the celebration party. Maybe you know, more people's New Year party could be a 2030, like let's celebrate the,
Oh, I love that idea.
yeah. Great theme, right?
Absolutely.
Who's not going to want to go to that party?
You know,
20.
definitely on, well, I will contact you privately, but I definitely would love to on the January 1st Saturday Night Live. That is that night, the night after New Year's Eve.
Yeah.
And I'm designing Kristen Hoffman as my co-host for that show.
Oh,
And
let's do
so
something then.
let's do that. Let's do that.
Yeah. Let's do a 2030. That sounds great.
Let's have a 2030 visioning celebration party. I love that
Yeah, let's
idea.
do it. Perfect.
All right. Thank you, Lucien, for your amazingness, who you are. Trish, I adore you. And I'm going to go back and talk live with all the people who've been watching the video.
Perfect. Great.
All right.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Trish.
Fascism. That's so